Hello. Hey, everyone who's early. We'll be starting in 3 minutes, 5 minutes. Yo, IRL server. Hey, Aiden. Glad to have you here. I'm glad to have everyone here. You can start asking your questions already if you like. I'm still writing some things down. In my special notebook, the master plan. TI, that's a great question. Hey, Ferry, welcome. You're not too late, you're just in time. Do you have any questions for today? Okay, let's get rolling. Thank you, everyone, for joining up, and share the link to invite other people in if you want. And yeah, the topic for today's video is it's a live Patreon questions and answers live stream. So it's all about bringing questions and yeah, just talking about whatever you want to talk about. And it's a Patreon questions and answers, but anyone's welcome to ask questions and to share their ideas and to discuss anything you like. And I want to say this month we raised $213 on Patreon, which is a record. We're 30 people on Patreon right now, which is a record for me. I've never had so many people support me, and it's like it comes at a time where I felt like I've been contributing a little less than usual, and I'm sorry about that. I have just started a new job, and while I will be working less in the future than I did at my last job, I still have been working so much, and I still have so much going on that I haven't been able to really put myself into this project as much as I wanted to. But I will be getting back on track, and I am getting back on track. Full of inspiration and full of new theories. So that's why I call this stream a mindset theory tease. So we got 3 questions already. The first is about TI versus NI from IRL server. The second is from Aiden about extroverted sensing, losing your ability for a complicated thought when in extroverted sensing. The third is from Anna, which she says she's an ENFP, a turbulent ENFP. She gets very overwhelmed by too much sensory stimulation, like, for example, when all your kids are talking at once. So she says she can't think when that happens. So I'm going to start with talking about TI versus NI. And TI versus NI, those are cognitive functions designed by Carl Jung, and they have later on been reworked by the Myers-Briggs type indicator. So essentially, there are 2 definitions of introverted thinking. There is the Jungian definition, and there is the Myers-Briggs definition of introverted thinking. And basically, what the Jungian definition says is introverted thinking has to do with your process of rationalization and logic, and of thinking about your experiences and defining your experiences, and trying to map out logically how something works. I tend to sum it up as like your skill in critical thinking. If you would develop this function, what you would be developing is basically critical thinking. You would be critically assessing information. You would be determining what it means. You would be determining if it's objective. You would be determining how to understand it and how to interpret it. Take what is good music, what is art, what is the best way to drive a car, how does a clock work, what are the essential parts of a clock. That ability to basically deconstruct and to see, to map out and evaluate how something works. Then there is the Myers-Briggs definition, and the Myers-Briggs Institute, they say introverted thinkers are thinking and perceiving types. So here they start talking about introverted thinking as essentially accuracy, your ability to pinpoint something as better than something else, and to say, let's make this decision instead of that decision. To the Myers-Briggs Institution, it's a lot more about your ability to weigh options against each other and to determine this option is better. So it's a lot more about decision making, where for Carl Jung, it was a lot more about evaluation. So this is an important distinction. There are evaluative functions and evaluative processes in the brain, and there are directing parts of the brain, or decision-making processes. So you can evaluate a situation, or you can make a decision about what is better compared to something else. And evaluation is essentially about what do we think about a situation. If you take in information about a situation, if you observe if you observe your environment, if you observe process, or if you listen to somebody singing, how do you determine the value or the quality of this? That's evaluation. But directing or decision making, that's more about when you are about to make a decision, what arguments do you use to make that decision? Thinking and perceiving is often associated with argumentativeness. INTPs and ENTPs and ESTPs, they're often associated with being able to argue this over that. That's better because of that. This argument is better than this argument. That ability to critically come up with good arguments and to win a debate over another person. Basically, that ability to look at something, and what you're learning is that there is introverted thinking, and then there is thinking and perceiving. So introverted thinking, that's something even an INTJ has. If you think of the greatest critical thinkers, you're probably thinking of INTPs and INTJs, perhaps ISTJs and ISTPs, those that can like look at something and can think about it completely logically. Okay, what is this situation? How can we understand the situation? When you're thinking of those that are strong in basically argumentation, then you're thinking of INTPs, ENTPs, ISTPs, ESTPs. So you're looking at two different functions. You're looking at two different processes. And when you compare it to introverted intuition, what you'll find is that introverted intuition is philosophical. It's a writing function. Introverted thinking can be, if we talk about introverted thinking as an evaluation, introverted intuition is a process of writing down, or it's basically perception. Evaluation is different from perception, because evaluation is, what do I feel about what's going on? What do I think about what's going on? And introverted intuition is a writing process. So it's basically noting down what you are learning from a situation, what the information you're getting. This is what I'm getting from the situation. This is how I understand the situation. This is the information that I'm getting, acquiring about what's going on around me. So for me, introverted intuition is a lot more existential and philosophical in its nature. It's about theory and insight, where introverted thinking is about critical thinking and logic. I don't engage in I can engage in any cognitive process, and I can engage in introverted thinking, and I can use it, and I can, especially because I've studied it so much, I can understand its value, and I can understand that it's important, and I can try to practice its lessons in what I do. I can try to think as my friends that are introverted thinkers, and I can try to mimic their process, and I can try to copy it and to apply it on my own work and to assess it. I can use it to determine the quality of my own work. But I favor, as an INFJ, you tend to favor introverted feeling over introverted thinking. You should give it more priority. You shouldn't let introverted thinking outweigh introverted feeling. Simply because it matters more, like it will make you happier. If you can master introverted feeling, you'll be happier than if you can master introverted thinking. If you can master introverted feeling, you can make sure that what you're doing values and matters to you. If, as an INFJ, if you go too much into introverted thinking, you'll be wondering what the point of your own work is. Why are you doing it? Why am I doing it? What's the point of it? It won't be giving you anything. It will feel cold and hard. But if you get into introverted feeling and you start feeling like it's giving you greater understanding of life and death and humanity and nature, and if it's starting to let you resonate with the world around you, and if it's starting to make sense of who you are, that's gonna give you a sense of meaning. So that's very important. Now Aiden, he asked about extroverted sensing and losing your ability for complicated thought. Basically, as I told you, introverted intuition is a perception process, and so is extroverted sensing. So introverted intuition is essentially something that we go into to make theories about life and why we're here and what the point of life is and what we're doing here. It's something philosophical in its nature. It's something existential in its nature. Extroverted sensing, it's something a scout would use to map out their environment. This is what this environment looks like. This is what this situation looks like. This is it's purely about your experience of something. So it's theory versus experience. It's having theoretical awareness of something that you haven't experienced, or it is having, as an ESTP, experience of something, even if you can't back it up with any theory, or even if you can't explain why it is that way. You can say this is how the world is, and you can say this is how it looks, but you can't say why it looks that way. As an ESTP or an ESFP, you can't say or back up what you say with theory. As an INFJ or an INTJ or an INTP, you can't really back up your theories with the experience. You can't say, you can't really talk about how something looks or how something is. And the thing is, as an INFJ, I feel that the reality around me is very iffy. It's like I can't really uh, trust it, that it's really there, that it's really happening, that it's really going on, unless I back it up with theory. I give a lot more preference to what I can explain using introverted means, internal means, than external means. And I give a lot more credence to what I can back up theoretically or with my imagination and to basically introspecting on it than what I can clearly observe and what I can tell factually is the case about a situation. So, does going into extroverted sensing take away from that theory? Yeah, it does. If you go into it, if you go deep into an experience, it's very hard to formulate a theory about something. The more I look at something, the closer I get to something, the more I get in the zone, the harder it is for me to access my writing function. I feel essentially blocked. I can't explain why I'm there or what it means or where it comes from. I get overwhelmed and I to some extent lose my ability to think. My girlfriend would freeze me up in a situation where I'm overwhelmed, and she would tell me to slow down, to stop, and to think, and and then I would basically close my eyes. And that's the thing. She asks me a question, and I close my eyes to come up with an answer. That's what I usually do. When I'm about to give an answer to a question, I always close my eyes, and then I think of the answer because that's how I best come up with ideas. That's how I come up with answers. It's so much easier for me to take that process than to open my eyes and to get close to something. And I can sometimes find myself staring at something. My mind is completely blank and I'm not thinking of anything. It's a complete waste of time. So you have to make sure you don't get too close and you have to give yourself privacy. I would often go off to my own private spare, my own room, to the bathroom, somewhere where nobody else is. And that would boost my thinking and my ability to write and my perception. And it will help me see more and understand things better. Now, Ferry says, can you tell me about how to see the difference between using purely NE or using NE paired with thinking extroversion? So I never really know when I accidentally slip into TE. So as an INFP, what you'll find is NE and TE are a bit complicated. INFPs have the dialoguing style that we associate with extrovert intuitives, like popping out ideas and thoughts, saying, let's see, can we see it from that perspective? Can we understand from that perspective? That ability to dialogue and share information and thoughts and possibilities. And they have the feeling and perceiving style, which is honesty or modesty. It's about your personal truth. So it's basically NFPs engage in this process of which they come up with ideas and they act as catalysts and they weigh different thoughts and they say, can we see it like this or can we see it like that? Is this the truth or is that the truth? Like they are interested in the truth and they're interested in ideas. And they go into this and they go into discussions to try to figure out the truth. They're very collaborative in this process. It's basically throwing out and getting answers back, throwing out and getting answers back. So it's a very interactive process. NP is very interactive. So going into TE, how do you notice when you're slipping into TE as an INFP? Well, first you'll notice you're starting to feel blocked in your evaluative function. When you go into TE as an INFP, you start to feel like you have to be more busy. INFPs in extrovert thinking start feeling, oh, I have to do more. I have to be more active. I have to be more busy. You start feeling unproductive. You start feeling like you're wasting your time and like you're not doing anything. And you're starting to kind of feel this push. Oh, I have to be busy all the time. Like INFPs and ENFPs in a TE grip, they feel they always have to do something. They always have to work on something. They always have to be productive with everything they do. They always have to be productive with it. And this comes at the expense of basically taking your time to find out your personal truth, and basically trying to figure out how you see things, and basically taking the time to introspect on your life and on who you are and what you're doing and why you're doing it and for what purpose. So you're doing more and more, but you can also feel like what you can also start wondering why you're doing it. Why am I engaging in this process to begin it? Why am I always so busy? Like, you hear this FPs keep on talking about how they have so much going on, and how they're so busy, and how they feel like they don't really get any value from it. They hate everything they're doing, but they still feel this pressure to be busy. It's like this tug of war, like, oh, I have to be busy, but I don't like what I'm doing. So it's like feeling like what you're doing is pointless and like it has no point. So it's you really have to take a step back and start wondering, do I really have to be so busy? Do I really have to do this? Do I really have to be so productive all the time? Or is it more important that I do things that I find to be important personally, that I think matter to me, that speak to who I am as a person? It's very important that what you do can speak to who you are as a person. And if you're forced to be busy because of work or school, you have to find a way to translate over time. Okay, what I'm doing right now is not really what I want to be doing. How can I make sure that in the future I will be doing more of what I want to be doing and what I find personally important? So you have to organize your life and look at, from that perspective, what do I really want to be doing? Like, make a list. What do I like? What do I not like? And try to get rid of those things you don't like. Do we have any other questions? Anyone else wondering about something? I see Jesus is my lady. Says, I notice how helpless I feel as an ENFP with ISTP emotional struggles. What is the best way to encourage them, not hurt them? My advice being useless because they don't understand, acknowledge their emotion. So that's a tricky one. I'm gonna get back to your question as well, Anna. Sorry. I'm gonna start with Anna's question, I think. Anna asked again about becoming overwhelmed by sensory stimulation and all of my kids talking at once. When I get overwhelmed, I can't think. So, yeah, often if you want to get onto stereotypes, sensing is all about action and immediacy and here and now and this thing that's we're doing right now in this situation. Intuition is a lot more about thinking. It's a lot more about dialoguing, communication, discussion. Like, what do we think about a situation? What do we see? How do we see it? How do we understand it? How do we comprehend it? It's about um, Dave Superpower said, yeah, intuition is loosely basically the imagination. And generally, that's very correct. Like, this intuition is a lot more about imagination. Yeah, basically. It doesn't have to get a lot harder than that. But the question is, why do intuitives prefer to use the imagination? And why do they prefer communication over action? The basic answer is overwhelm. Actions are overwhelming. Real life is overwhelming. Pressure, deadlines, immediacy, here and now, everything that's happening in this situation, it's overwhelming. Planning tomorrow, making lists, discussing what we're going to do next, planning and designing our fantasy home, living room, how we want our next place to look, looking at new apartments, seeing maybe we could go there, maybe we could do that. That's intuition. Doing it, going there, staying there, moving, fixing everything, putting everything together, that's sensing. So yeah, that is overwhelming. And the best solution is let intuition drive. Let sensing be in the passenger seat. Let your intuition dominate everything you do. Make sure intuition is always leading what you do. Make sure that it always comes from your imagination. It comes because you're engaging in sensing because of your imagination, because of your ideas, because of what you discussed with other people around you, because of all the creative opportunities it will present. Don't engage in sensing just because of sensing. Engage in sensing because of your imagination and let that drive. Because intuition is where you, as an intuitive, get your energy. Sensing is where you pick up your package on your back. So having a lot of sensing in your life is having a lot of packaging on your back. It's burdens on your shoulders. It's everything you have to hold off. And when you're walking around and you're feeling like, oh, I'm so tired, I'm so exhausted, why am I so tired all the time? Well, it's because you have too much sensing in your life. So then what you want to do is slow down, remind yourself that things don't have to be rushed. You don't have to do everything right now. You don't have to have everything fall together at once. You don't have to do everything now. Do things, but keep talking while you do it. Like, do things and have discussions with your friends as you work on it. Move, and then move slowly, and then have fun with the people around you, and make games and make intuitive exercises as you do. Next question from Jesus is my lady, right? The ENFP with dealing with ISTPs. Well, first, extroverted feelers, ENFPs and ENFJs and ESFPs, they tend to come from the perspective of compassion. Basically, like this, what matters. It's an evaluative process, so it's about compassion. It's uh, what you find to be important in a situation and with other people, in regards to other people. Everything around you that you feel matters to you. Like, as an extroverted feeling type, what you want is to have things around you that matter, things around you that are important. As an introverted thinking type, what you'll find is what you want is things that rationally make sense around you, things that you can understand critically, things that you can think about from the perspective and understand. So the main issue when ENFPs are talking to, say, ISTPs or INTJs is the INTJ, the INTP is going, why is she saying this? Why does she care about that? Why does this matter to her? Logically speaking, what is it that makes it so important to her? Where for the ENFP, the main question is, does he really care about this? Does he see how important this is? Does he like this or does he dislike this? Like that question of what do they care about? And wanting the other person to care about the same things you do. And the main issue is we assume we want the other person to think just like we do, and we expect them to think just like we do. And it's a blind spot. We want to get them to care and to feel compassion and to become passionate about it just as we are. But they don't want to, and they don't value that, and they don't find that important. Why should they do that? And that's the question we have to ask ourselves. Why do they have to care about it? Isn't it enough that I care about it? Does everyone else have to care about it as well? Or is it enough that just the other people care about it? So you just have to think about it. Does everyone else have to care about the same things you do? Or is it enough that you care about it? Does everyone have to look at something rationally, or is it completely okay that only you do? So Dave asks if different types require different types of meditation. That's possible. Though, do all types require meditation? I feel like we're going from a society where we talked about meditation as in silent contemplation and cleaning off your head of thoughts and just being, to more mindful practices. We're starting to switch in society. We're starting to talk, instead of meditation, everyone's starting to talk about mindfulness. When perhaps mindfulness is a form of meditation. Because in mindfulness, we're slowing down and we're stopping and we're thinking about and becoming more conscious of life and of the world around us. And we're not letting it stress us as much. It's a state of relaxation. It's a state of like meditative contemplation. You feel clear, and it's not as stressful. It's not as demanding. It's not as much. It's just enough. So maybe mindfulness is another form of intuition. Maybe mindfulness is more important than to meditation. INTP Paul asks if it's true that it's more likely for sensor parents to produce intuitive offspring than for intuitive parents to produce sensor offspring. Well, I think if we believe type to be in part hardwired, then type must be in part genetic. And then it must be that intuitives are more likely to have intuitive kids and sensors more likely to have sensing kids. I believe this is more true than we think. However, there is a bias in that we tend to think our parents are sensors when we are intuitives. And that bias comes from the old bias against all the generations. We're young, so we have computers, we have new ideas and new tech, and then we have our parents that seem so critical and so skeptical, and oh, I don't need computers, and oh, I don't want to get Facebook, oh, I don't care about this. And we can think they must be censors, they must be conservative. But really, it's a generational shift. And we have to look at if our parents might actually be intuitives, if they actually have intuition from a less stereotypical angle. And you have to look at how were they as kids. When they were kids, were they actually perhaps the rebels, the new people with the new ideas, with the great imagination, with the um, starting up new discussions? If they were, perhaps they are still intuitives, perhaps they are intuitives, even if they don't share our values as the younger generation. Anchor asks if good and evil really exists or if it depends on which side you're taking. I believe good is when you act in accordance with your values and with what matters to you and what is important to you. If you act to do what you want and what you think is right. And of course, that can differ. What feels right to you, perhaps freedom, might feel different to somebody else. Perhaps another person might say tradition is more important or um, security is more important. The problem is we tend to assume these things cannot exist together. We can't have freedom because we have to protect our traditions, or we can't have traditions because we have to make sure everyone is free, and that's because we're trying to assert our own values over other people, and we're trying to push our values on other people. Perhaps we need to come at a point of mutual respect, and we have to find some kind of balance. Anna says she's realized all of her best friends are sensing types, and I wonder if I'm surrounding myself with these types because I feel like I should be more sensing based on my upbringing. How do I grow my NEFI? I think it's also like when you think about it, we expect our friends to be anchors. When we have ideas, we expect our friends to be our anchors. They are always going to be by our side, and they're always going to stick by us, even if they don't personally agree. And they're always going to be like the people we can count on to support us, but at the same time to look out for us and to keep our back clean. So I feel like when other people have great ideas or when other people are very excited, a friend feels that they have to be less excited. Yes, I'm excited for you, but I'm also looking out for you. And I also feel a need to look out for you. So I feel a need to be critical and to question you and to ask if it will really work and to make sure you know and to make sure you're prepared that it might not always go as you will. And I think that steadiness can make them appear more sensing than they are. Still, I feel like sensing and intuition is like a hobby. It's like the hobby function. It's like the hobby language. It's like, what is your dominant hobby? What do you get the most energy from? So I tend to find that at work we tend to bond more with people who share our feeling or thinking function, while in friendships and in hobbies we tend to relate more to people that share are intuitive or are sensing functions. So intuitives tend to choose intuitives as friends more often than not, because there is a chance to get a similar hobby and similar outlets. Whereas at work, it's more like important to match with somebody that shares your values and what you think is important. Dave asks, my wife is an ESFJ and I see her in the grip of introverted thinking. How can I respond or help? So for the ESFJ, the IT grip is really like a sense of crisis for your values and for what you believe in. It's really like a sense of doubt towards what you care about, what's important to you. And it's like, is this really the right thing? Can I really trust myself? Is this really good? What am I really doing? Is it really the right thing to do? And it's also like a feeling that that can come after you have had a bad experience. I feel like a lot of EFs come from that experience, that after they've had a bad experience in relationships or whatever, they have to put on a guard and they have to be strong and they have to stop caring so much and have to make sure it doesn't get to them. They have to become more cold and cool, and it's like they put on this stone face. They're not engaging in so much in introverted thinking because they're not reviewing the situation. They're not thinking critically about it. They're not like going into it and trying to assess it and gain information and awareness. They're more trying to protect themselves. The inferior functions, we use their inferior functions to protect ourselves. So what we can do is we can only encourage vulnerability. We have to let the other person process their bad experiences. We have to let them get the worries they have out there. We have to let them share their sadness and their pain and their struggles, to tell them it's okay, that they can talk with you, to remind them to speak out about what they feel and what's important to her. The best way to get people out of their inferior function is to promote vulnerability, no matter what type. You have to promote vulnerability. You have to show them that they can be themselves, and you have to get them to relax, and you have to disarm their guard. You have to get them out of their guard. I'm going to be right back. I'm going to start rounding off, but I'm going to answer the last questions quickly. Where can I find intellectuals? Especially if I can't go to college. Now, Phil, I would recommend that you join book circles, philosophy circles, hobby groups, discussion groups. They're great for finding like minded people. Whatever you're interested in, go do that. INTP Paul asks how it's like for me to be an intuitive man in a sensor family and in a sensor society overall. Um, my parents are intuitives. My dad is an INFJ and my mom is an INFP. I grew up in a very small rural society. I was engaged in a lot of intuitive communities, so I was never that caught up in a sensor society. And I think intuitives are more common in Nordic countries. So, time for me to round up. Yep. Okay. Sorry. Thank you all for joining up, and thank you all for supporting me on Patreon and for everything you're doing. It's gonna be so awesome. I was live streaming. I'm just about to turn it off. Okay. So thank you all for joining up, and join up on Discord, and leave a like and share and subscribe this video if thought it was fun.